On November 27, 1940, in a hospital in San Francisco, Li Xiaolong was born. The doctor who handled the baby's birth gave him the English name Bruce and his full name Bruce Li Junfan. Bruce Li is the son of Li Hoi Chuan and Grace Ho. He has 4 brothers named Phoebe, Agnes, Peter and also Robert. His father worked as an opera artist, which when Bruce Li was born his family toured America. Thus the legend was born. When he was 3 months old, Bruce Li, who was still a toddler, then returned to Hong Kong. Bruce Li is one of the legendary martial arts actor who is popular in the world. Besides being known as an actor, he is also known as one of the prolific film directors and writers. Bruce Li's amazing martial arts skills have made him a legend known to the world. Since childhood, Bruce was weak and often sick. His parents, in order to strive for healthy growth, so at the age of 7 he was included in Tai Chi training. Unexpectedly, since then Bruce Li has walked the path of martial arts, and has managed to get a big name. Bruce's childhood coincided with the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong during World War II, 1941-1945. At that time the Li family lived on Nathan Road, Kowloon, adjacent to the Japanese Army military camp. After the war ended, Hong Kong returned to Britain. While at school, he and his friends often fought with British children. It was because of his hatred of the British, who looked down on the Chinese. Often fighting made Bruce interested in learning martial arts. At the age of 13, Bruce Li became a student of Yip Man, the master of Wing Chun Kung Fu. For 5 years Bruce studied Kung Fu diligently. His physical condition, which was initially unhealthy, gradually improved because he always trained his body. When he first learned Kung Fu, he used his skills to beat up his opponents, but in the end he realized that defending his honor was not always done by fighting physically. Although Bruce Li was still a boy, he was wholehearted in his practice. He made a stick figure in his house and practiced tirelessly every day against the block. When he was in high school, his school grades were not very good, but in sports and the arts he had a good reputation. At the time of the Inter-School Boxing Championship, he managed to win after defeating a British student. Bruce Li loves acting and is very enthusiastic about this activity. He has even been acting since he was 3 months old in the film Golden Gate Girl, 1941. This is because his father, knowing that little Bruce was very happy to appear in public, often took Bruce into the film studio. When he was 6 years old, little Bruce acted for the first time in a film called A Beginning of a Boy. This is not surprising because his father Li Hoi Chun is a film actor. At the age of 18, Bruce Li has appeared in 20 films. However, her parents were a little disappointed because her grades at school were not that good. After graduating from high school, he was advised to go to America, following his older brothers who had previously studied there. In April 1959, Bruce went to San Francisco by ship. In San Francisco, Bruce became a dance teacher. This was his first job in America. Bruce then moved to his friend Ruby Chow's house in Seattle. Here he temporarily focuses on studying while doing various jobs such as waiters in restaurants or delivering newspapers. He attended Edison Technical School and then the University of Washington, majoring in philosophy. On the basis of his abilities as a martial arts expert, he wrote many essays on Kung Fu and its philosophy. After college he returned to practicing Kung Fu. Together with his friends he opened a kind of training ground to practice Kung Fu movements. Several new students were interested and joined the practice. He gave the Kung Fu Association the name Junfan Kung Fu Institute. This place is on the ground floor of a building in Seattle's Chinatown. In the early 1960s, Kung Fu was not yet known by the American public, but Bruce Lee tried to introduce Kung Fu by demonstrating it to universities. He opened a larger class in 1963 at 4750 University Way. One of the new students who entered in 1963 was named Linda Emery. He is a freshman at the University of Washington. Linda knew Bruce as a guest lecturer in a Chinese philosophy course at Garfield High School. Not long after, the two of them became lovers. They finally married in 1964. Bruce Lee and Linda moved to Oakland and opened a second Kung Fu class there with James Lee, while he entrusted his Seattle class to his assistant, Taki Kimura. Due to his disappointment in a physical fight in 1964 in Oakland, Bruce felt the need to further explore his martial arts skills and further improve his fitness. He created a new martial art called jidouin. In 1965, the child from marriage to Linda, Brandon Bruce Lee, was born. In the mid-60s, Bruce began to turn to acting. That's because he is no longer interested in opening more martial arts schools. If there are more schools, he may lack time to maintain the quality of his teachings. Because in his habit, he trains Kung Fu with his students one by one in not a small amount of time. He felt that his love of martial arts should not be an intention for profit. Bruce Lee was acquainted with a film producer named William Dozier. Bruce Lee signed a contract with Dozier for 1 year. In 1966, serialization of the Green Hornet began. Bruce Lee plays Kato. The first time in the making, they had a hard time filming a Bruce scene that was too fast, so they asked him to go slower. The Green Hornet was a success and was well received by the audience. Bruce pays great attention to physical exercise and fitness. In addition to training with the students, the method of physical exercise that he does is to train weights with the stomach and arms. Another method is to lift the barbell without warming up and place it over your shoulders. After frequently practicing the method, he was known to have injured the neural network. He was advised to rest completely for 6 months in bed. He is not allowed to practice Kung Fu. This makes him depressed, so much time is spent writing. After a few months, Bruce returned to health and slowly regained his strength to train. In subsequent films, he seems to have used Kung Fu to the fullest. But in order to treat his back, he had to rest and therapy. Several film ideas submitted by Bruce Lee to Warner Brothers failed to materialize, including Kung Fu and the Silent Flute. Kung Fu failed because of a role choice conflict, while the Silent Flute did not find a suitable filming location. After several films for America failed to produce, Bruce Lee decided to go to Hong Kong. Here he signed a contract to appear in 2 films by Hong Kong film producer Raymond Chow from the Golden Harvest Company. The film The Big Boss, released in 1971, was a huge success in Hong Kong. In September 1971, Bruce moved to Hong Kong with his family and began shooting for the second film with Golden Harvest. Entitled Fist of Fury, or also known as Chinese Connection, this film turned out to be more successful than the first film, so that it broke box office records. The third film, he returned to work with Raymond Chow to form Concord Productions. He not only wrote the script for The Way of the Dragon or Return of the Dragon, but he also produced it. This film was a success and broke box office records. In 1972, Bruce began producing the film The Game of Death. But in the middle, Warner Brothers visited Bruce Lee and asked him to cooperate in the making of this film. Then the first collaboration between Hong Kong and American film producers was achieved. At the time, the producer of Warner Brothers was Ted Ashley. After the success of The Game of Death, Bruce Lee continued to produce his next film, Enter the Dragon. The process of making Enter the Dragon encountered many obstacles and quite frustrated Bruce Lee. He wanted it to be a good film that American audiences would accept. Finally, Enter the Dragon was released in Hollywood's Chinese theater in August 1973. However, Bruce was unable to watch it. On July 20, 1973, Bruce developed a headache. He was advised to take a painkiller called Equagesic. After taking one pill, he fell asleep and fell into a coma. He could not get back up and was declared dead. Not a few who do not believe the news. The results of forensic research stated the cause of Bruce's death 9 days later. It is known that Bruce was hypersensitive to the drug, which caused swelling in the brain, which led to his coma and death. Many have speculated about the cause of his death, but Lee's former film producer, Raymond Chow, gave a firm statement that Lee's death was purely an accident. According to Chow's knowledge, Lee died suddenly at the age of 32 because he took the wrong headache medication. His death at the home of Hong Kong actress Betty Ting Pei in 1973 was due to edema or swelling in her brain.